Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, a look back at one of the most iconic photos of the Syrian refugee crisis.
We'll hear the backstory to the image of the boy on the beach and look at the current state of Syrian refugees.
Sunday will mark the date 3 years ago when the Kurdi family, mother Rehanna and her 2 young sons, Ghalib and Alan, drowned in the Mediterranean Sea along with other Syrian refugees. They were attempting to travel from Turkey to the Greek island of Kos, and they were accompanied by their father, Abdullah, who was trying to move his family to a place where they could have a better life. Now, the iconic photo of Alan, whose tiny body washed up on the shore of a Turkish resort town, became a rallying point for activists and governments to offer assistance in the refugee crisis.
Online, the image of the lifeless boy was shared millions of times. Before the world knew his name, people were using the hashtag #DrownedSyrianBoy and humanity washed ashore.
Today, we're going to hear a very deeply personal take on the Syrian refugee crisis. Joining us from Izmit, Turkey, we have Alan Kurdi's aunt, Tima Kurdi. She has recently published a family memoir called The Boy on the Beach. Also joining us via Skype is Dr. Zaher Zalul, co-founder and president of the humanitarian assistance organization Med Global. He's in Chicago and has just returned from Jordan and Lebanon, where he met with Syrian refugees. And Leonard Doyle, spokesperson for the International Organization for Migration, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland. It is good to have you here, everybody. I want to start with a TEDx talk that Tima did 2 years ago, personalizing the refugee crisis. Have a look, have a listen.
The picture of Alan Kurdi is the gift to us, to you and me. Is the powerful image to teach us how we can use today a tragedy as a seed of hope, not to invite a tragedy, but to recognize that it's going to happen. And when it does, can we open our door, an arm, and heart? Can we find hope?
Tima, I was so surprised when I was watching your TED Talk and you put the picture of your little nephew in that TED Talk. You just faced it head on, that picture, somebody that you knew and loved. Why did you do that?
To be honest, for me, I only look at that picture once, just to recognize it, and we know he is my nephew. And I can't even really look at it anymore. The only reason I wanna actually keep showing that picture to the world is just because it's just to be a permanent reminder, so we do not forget and we do not go silent. Because I believe somehow that image was so powerful that God put the shine and the light on that boy just to wake up the world and say enough suffering and enough children are dying and the world are silent.
You mentioned wanting it to be a permanent reminder, Tima. I want to share a reflection from a journalist who read your book, in which you describe the backstory to what should be a reminder. This is a moving review from Bilal Qureshi, who wrote this in the Washington Post. After a photo of her nephew's drowned body went viral, a Syrian woman tells the family's story. Here's what he told the stream about what he took from your memoir.
Ms. Kurdi, it's really nice to be able to thank you for this beautiful book. It was very moving to be returned to that fall of 2015 when that terrible photograph was published all over the world. And I think I've just been wondering, and I'm curious to ask what you think has happened to our global sense of empathy that moment galvanized. I'd be curious to hear why you think and how you think we can return to that moment and that feeling of being more open-hearted toward migrants and refugees. Thank you again so much.
So he mentions empathy there. Tima, what would you say to the idea that the empathy went away?
You know, for us, for somehow, we have a tragedy in our life, in a daily life. We hear it in the radio. We live with a tragedy every single day in your neighbor, in your community. But somehow the people get too busy that they become numb, that it's not my tragedy anymore. The only thing I feel that people, they should speak up. We should keep remind them about this is the true story of the human suffer, and so people can open their heart and take action and help the others. Like for me, sharing my family story, it's not easy for me. By speaking up, and an example, I go around universities. I chose to do this, to share the story, to just, I believe those young generation, they are our voice, they are our future. And by hearing a tragic story that the world heard about it and everybody start to forget and the suffering continue, when I keep talking about it and everybody will move and say, I want to do something, you change my life, by sharing your story. So the more they tell me, please keep doing this and share it with the world, the more I feel it should be a permanent reminder. And that's why, this is why I do this, right?
How do they react, Tima, when you tell them? How much detail do you tell them about what happened to you and your family?
I mostly, when I go talk first, I have only similar to the TEDx talk. I highlight the story, but after that, of course, there is a question I ask. Most people, they will ask me in detail, so why they will put themselves in that danger, the risky journey. Why those thousands of people, they think they're going to come to Europe? What's the difference? Why they don't stay in their home?
Tima, these are good questions. Would you give us a couple of those answers? Are you prepared for those answers?
Of course,
yeah.
of course.
What do you tell them?
Thousand of time I said to them, I give them an example. I will share with them the story. Before even during the war, I will tell them, imagine yourself. You and your family, you are in a safe country, peaceful. All of a sudden, you are in a war zone. Your own kids, they are playing soccer in the street. It's a normal kids. And all of a sudden, there is a person, a suicide bomber, blow himself out. And those young children, they witness the whole body will be in pieces, the blood all over. So can you imagine that? Can you imagine the kids, how they're going to go home, how they're going to take that memory for a long, long time in their mind? They can't sleep, they're traumatized. So they go to school, an example, in a war zone. The parents will pray to God, I hope they will come back home in peace, safe. And they will witness their school friend got shot in the head in front of their eyes. So when I share personal story from neighbor, from my own family to them, and they will think, they said, oh, this is how it is. I'm so sorry. Now I understand. So a small detail, sometimes we share a personal story from experience to the people who basically, like for us, living far away from the reality. And I always tell them, from me, being, visiting refugee camp, seeing the people, how they live here in Turkey, I hear the news, an example. I say, it changed my life. It really changed my life, because I was like everybody else, watching the news, feel sorry for the people, have a personal connection by the phone, hearing the struggle. But it's not the same when you actually go in person and visit and talk to these real people to understand them. And I have university students actually. I had a talk in the state in Philadelphia, Philadelphia Temple University, actually. And I have people, the group actually sent me a personal thank you for a change in their heart, to open their heart, that they were first kind of, refugee, why should we take them? We have lots of people in our country. We need to deal with our own people. I have a personal thank you from them that I moved them, and they went to Greece to actually go and see it by themselves. And when they come back, again, they sent me another message that forever, that they thank me to move them to do this. So all of us have the power to talk to people who will say, you are from the Middle East, and you are Muslim, you are Christian. We need to educate people that no matter what, we are people. Like
Tima, when it comes to educating people, I think that you, of course, are doing that as you speak. The amount of tweets that I see coming in reference that. But I wanted to pivot here to this tweet from Dr. Zahir Sahlul on our panel today, who wrote in yesterday saying everyone knows where he or she was when they saw the picture of your nephew for the first time. So 3 years ago is when that picture surfaced. Today, news looks like this. This is Kareem tweeting in. Syrian refugees in Lebanon are now at risk of forced returns, despite ongoing battles, attacks from militant insurgencies, cases of imprisonment, torture, and forced conscription. Zahir, looking at the news as it is 3 years on, where do we stand? I know you just came back from Lebanon, from the refugee camps. What's your take?
First of all, I convey my deep condolences to Tina and the family of Aylan Kurdi. I didn't have a chance to talk to you in person, but this is, of course, a child that touched the hearts of many Syrians and many people throughout the world. I remember my Senator Duckworth, who called me one day after she saw the picture, and she has a young child, and she told me that after she saw the child, the picture of Aylan, she hugged her child, she started to crying, and then she signed a letter asking President Obama at that time to open the door to Syrian refugees to be resettled in the United States, and that letter asked for President Obama to resettle 200,000 Syrian refugees. The travesty that now, in 2018, 3 years after the picture, we had resettled in the United States only 18,000 Syrian refugees, much less than Canada, much less than, of course, Germany, who took the lead and opened the door to Syrian refugees, and Sweden and other countries. And it's shameful in the United States that we only resettled 18,000 refugees. After the Muslim ban, we only had few Syrians who were resettled. The other thing that, there is a Somali-British poet who wrote after she saw the pictures of Aylan Kurdi about why people are putting their children on the boat. And she said that no one puts their children on the boat unless the water is safer than the land. And no one leaves home unless the home is the mouth of a shark. And Syria is still a mouth of the shark. And right now we're hearing about return of Syrian refugees from Lebanon and Jordan. Russia, it looks like it's taken the leadership in initiative to push Syrian refugees to go back from Jordan and Lebanon, knowing that Syria is still not safe, it's still the mouth of the shark. We're talking right now about Idlib, where there are 3 million people in Idlib, half of them are children, and they're under the threat of military assault from the Russian and the Syrian army. And that will create huge humanitarian crisis. Let's also not forget that in this year, in 2018, we had more than 1 million Syrian displaced people inside Syria. And the reason that they are displaced inside Syria, because all countries around Syria have blocked all of their borders. I met with some Syrian refugees in Lebanon and in Jordan, and I asked them, what does it take for you to go back home? And they told me that we need, first of all, to change the circumstances that we fled Syria from. We still have a very brutal regime that is torturing people to death. Just last week, the Syrian regime have confirmed that it killed, or it didn't say that it killed. It said that more than 8,000 people died in the prison because of heart attacks. And they gave names, actually, of these people who died from Homs, from Daraya, from Muaddamiyya, from Dar'a, from Aleppo. So how can you expect refugees to return to Syria with the threat of torture, detention, and so forth.
Sure. So here,
Still,
let me just bring in Leonard here, because I'm interested to hear how things have changed in the last 3 years, Leonard. I'm looking at some headlines, and sometimes the headlines can be deceiving. So you can tell me, is this where we are right now? Refugee drownings skyrocket across the Mediterranean as Italy's new far-right government blocks rescue boats. That's from The Independent. Yahoo News, 3 babies dead, 100 missing in latest shipwreck off Libya. And in looking at some statistics for the global migrant deaths from the beginning of January to August of this year, and the most number of deaths are in the Mediterranean. At 1,500, more than 1,500, and those are the ones that we know about. What's changed, Leonard?
I think what's undoubtedly changed is that the public opinion in Europe has grown very cold towards the acceptance of refugees and indeed migrants, economic migrants. And we're seeing that in the politics right across Europe. We're seeing the punishment that the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, is having to go through for her bravery, for her huge leadership in inviting refugees to come and stay in the country. Right across the board, the politics have turned volatile, and they've turned to the extreme right in some cases. So I think we're going through a very difficult patch for refugees and for migrants in Europe, no question about it. And indeed, as the other panelists has mentioned, the surrounding countries as well have effectively put up the barriers. So there's nobody leaving, and not many want to return as we speak.
But when you speak of that, we got this comment on YouTube Live. This is a teacher who says, I remember I was working in a group that helped refugees in Greece, and how much the story brought attention and help to our group, and just how quickly that empathy disappeared. People got bored, the media got bored. So on that note of boredom, we found this tweet just scrolling around on our feed. This is from Andrew, and he wrote in, Europeans are no longer shocked by pictures of drowned children, just as Americans are getting used to images of caged children. We're letting the fear-mongering politicians undermine our basic humanity. So Andrew actually sent us a video comment picking up on that thread, and here's what he told the stream.
I think some sympathy for refugees and asylum seekers has diminished in recent years in Europe. This is mainly due to fear-mongering and hate-mongering by certain politicians who are trying to pretend that this group of people is a huge threat for some reason to their country, to their people, to Europe, and try to win votes off the back of that. We see this in places like Italy, where the interior minister has been threatening to send people back to Libya, where we know there's a great risk of torture. We've seen it in Hungary, where the government is literally starving asylum seekers in its custody in order to appear tough. We're the big, tough, powerful people, totally taking advantage of these powerless people. And that's supposed to make people sort of feel safe. It's vile.
Zahir, do you want to take that on?
I think what's important to mention that refugees do not want to leave their country. I spoke with many refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, Iraq, and they want to go back to Syria. But how can we create stability in Syria, safe circumstances that refugees can feel secure in Syria? Syria, by the way, the stability of Syria is very important for the United States national security. It's surrounded by allies. The refugee crisis in Syria has created a global refugee crisis that you're talking about, that created anti-refugee, anti-immigrant sentiment, the rise of hate groups, Islamophobia, and also rise of terrorism. And also, we need to remember that last generation of Syrians, the millions of children in the refugee camps in Jordan, in Lebanon, they're going to create a lot of instability in the future in the Middle East. So if we care about Syria, we have to create the circumstances in Syria that will let these refugees go back home. And these circumstances means political change, political settlement, and also having safety and dignity for the refugees. Right now, there is a law that enacted by the government in Syria that confiscate the lands and the properties of the refugees who left Syria if they do not show up within 30 days. This is law number 10. So in order to make it easy for the refugee to go back to Syria, we need to make sure that we pressure the governments that can influence the situation inside Syria.
Okay. Tima, I want to take our audience back to December 2018, when your brother Mohammed turned up at the airport with his kids. Let's roll that tape, have a look.
And they said, we watch in the news when the first plane arrived, when our prime minister welcomed those refugees. We were crying and we felt the love from those Canadian people. So they feel really comfortable now.
So two things there, Tima. One is I feel the love just of you hugging your family. That's coming across on the video. The other thing was that what happened to your family changed policy, changed global policy and refugee policy for a while. Where is it now, do you think? Are you still seeing those changes, or have everything kind of rolled back?
That's the sad part. Exactly, when we see it, every year I said, if we don't do something and find a peaceful solution to the war in Syria, to the crisis everywhere, if the world leader cannot agree on the solution, we're gonna see more worse and worse, and we're gonna create more refugee, and then what? So yes, I look back now, back then, Canada welcomed within 3 months, 25,000 was so beautiful, emotional to see this. So if everybody will do this for a while and welcome them, which they should until today, I always say every country should welcome them because they deserve to seek asylum. But in the bigger picture, which the world ignore, is they want to go home, but there is no home to go to. So why we can't use our voice? Why we can't urge the international community to urge and invest on more aid to actually send them back to their home. An example, I have a personal family story here. Their home, they want to go home 100%. They have no problem, not from the regime, not from everybody. But their home, it's been bombed. They need to fix it. I have 3 family told me the same story, 3 of them. They said, we don't care. We had enough from living out of our country as a refugee. And when people looking at us, it's almost the sign in our forehead, you are a refugee, you not belong to here.
Tima,
so they really want to go home.
As you're talking, Leonard is nodding. Leonard, this seems to totally resonate with the work that you're doing too and the stories that you know.
Well, what I think is really important is, as you're doing here, you're distinguishing between resettlement, people moving to a new country like Canada and the United States, as it was at least. Resettlement is always just going to be a small number of people, maybe 3%. And it's for the most vulnerable, really. And it's a huge cost, and it's a huge political fallout sometimes. What we really need to do is what we've just been hearing about, is refugees need to be able to go home. And that's the big intractable challenge right now. For obvious reasons, there are real difficulties in getting people back to reconstruct the country, to whatever sort of settlement is going to be there, whatever sort of resolution. That's what has to be fixed. As in so many conflicts around the world, it's the politics that are driving it. And as long as the politics are bad, it's going to be difficult. But clearly that's where, as you've just heard, refugees usually want to stay close and go home as soon as they can.
Malika.
So why is it so hard to actually urge our leader, the world leader? Why is it so hard? We can't just use our voices and tell them enough is enough, because nobody wants them. All the border is closed.
Tima, that is
right?
a classic. Tima, that is a classic question. We're right at the end of this program, but that is what we all ask every time we see refugees or migrants in dire circumstances. Thank you so much for taking part in the program, Zaher, Leonard, and especially Tima Kurdi. Thank you so much for being with us on the stream today. Our conversation continues always online. Malika and I will see you there at AJ Stream. Take care.